It was at the edge of twilight on an ordinary Tuesday evening that Sarah Collins found herself standing at the foreboding entrance of the long-abandoned Holworth factory. A sturdy woman of 35, Sarah had made a living out of salvaging rare parts from forgotten machines. An order had come in for components found only within the machinery at Holworth, coaxing her into the rusting skeleton of the industrial district. The factory, an industrial leviathan of brick and steel, was an eerie sight. It stood as a ghostly monument to a bygone era, casting long shadows that devoured the faint evening light. Its skeletal remains, under the pale wash of twilight, bore an uncanny resemblance to a desolate haunted house from an old horror movie. With a resolute deep breath, Sarah pushed the creaking factory door and stepped into the gloom. The air inside was heavy and stagnant, tainted with the musty smell of decay and wet rust. The deathly quiet within was only broken by the distant drip of leaking water and the soft scuttle of rats. Her flashlight carved a narrow path through the inky blackness, the narrow beam casting grotesque shadows on the machinery that lay silent and forgotten. As she ventured deeper into the heart of the factory, she discovered an old office, a decaying time capsule in the sea of darkness. Amidst dusty papers and antiquated equipment, a rusted safe sat stubbornly in the corner. It seemed oddly out of place, a silent sentinel holding on to secrets of a time long forgotten. Intrigued, Sarah made a mental note to return with tools from her shop to explore the safe's contents. Just as she was about to leave, the sound of coarse, hushed voices echoed from below. She followed the sound and found herself peering through a cracked floorboard. Below, in the factory's underbelly, a ruthless gang of criminals was plotting. Their faces, scarred by violence and hardship, were lit by the dim glow of a solitary lamp. Sarah felt a chill creep up her spine as she overheard their conversation. They were orchestrating a series of high-stakes robberies across the city, planning to use the factory as a base. The very thought sent a wave of dread washing over her. She realized that she was trapped in a spider web of criminal conspiracy in the bowels of an industrial mausoleum. She needed to escape and alert the authorities, but the factory was a labyrinthine nightmare of corroding machinery and shadowed corners. With each step, the creaking metal and the groaning floors seemed poised to betray her presence. As she navigated through the factory, every rustle and scrape was a specter of imminent danger. In her desperate flight, she stumbled upon an old maintenance phone, miraculously functional despite the decades of neglect. With trembling hands, she dialed 911, her voice barely above a whisper as she relayed the gang's chilling plot. As she hung up, her heart hammered in her chest. She heard the distant echo of footsteps growing louder. They were coming. Sarah bolted, her heart pounding in her ears like a frenzied drumbeat. She could hear the criminals closing in, their shouts echoing in the desolate expanse of the factory. Each thunderous footfall felt like a hunting drum, growing louder and more terrifying with every passing second. She dashed towards the main entrance, her adrenaline-fueled run turning into a desperate sprint. Just as she felt her strength give out, the factory was suddenly flooded with the harsh blare of sirens and the stark flash of red and blue lights. Police swarmed the factory, their sudden arrival disrupting the grim chase. Sarah was quickly taken to safety as the gang was apprehended. Her terrifying ordeal had not only prevented a citywide crime spree, but also unmasked the criminal underbelly lurking within the city's industrial ghost. However, despite emerging as an unsung hero, the terrifying events of that night left a permanent scar. The once forgotten Holworth factory had become a symbol of hidden terrors, a grim reminder of the darkness that could fester within the decaying bones of the city's past. The park was bathed in an eerie moonlight, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced with every rustle of the wind. A young man, barely 18, sat alone on a park bench, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of a life that was not his own. I watched him from a distance, my heart pounding in sync with the one I had lost. The heart, Mary's heart, was beating inside this young man. It was a chilling thought, one that filled me with a strange mix of grief and determination. I approached him, my footsteps muffled by the soft grass. He didn't see me until it was too late. I struck swiftly, a small, sharp blade in my hand. It was over in seconds. I left his lifeless body on the bench, a small incision in his chest, the only sign of my gruesome act. The heart, still warm, was now in my possession. I hadn't always been this way. I was once a man of action, a private investigator who had seen the worst that humanity had to offer. But nothing could have prepared me for the loss of my wife, Mary. The car accident was sudden, brutal, and left a gaping hole in my life that I couldn't fill. Mary was vibrant, full of life and love. Her laughter filled our home. Her love filled my heart. She had always wanted to be a mother, but medical complications had made it impossible. In the aftermath of her death, I learned that Mary's organs had been donated. A part of her was still living, still giving, even in death. This thought consumed me, gnawed at me until I could think of nothing else. I had to bring her back, piece by piece, organ by organ. The heart was just the beginning. The liver, the kidneys, each organ was tracked down with the same ruthless efficiency I had once used to hunt down criminals. Each organ was retrieved with surgical precision, leaving a trail of bodies in my wake. Each retrieval was a horror show of its own. The terror in the eyes of the recipients as they realized what was happening, the life draining from them as I claimed what was once Mary's. As I collected each organ, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I was bringing Mary back, fulfilling her wish to give life. But with each life I took, a part of me died. I was becoming a monster, and I knew it. I looked at the organs, each one carefully preserved in a glass jar. The heart, the liver, the kidneys. Each one a part of Mary, each one a part of me. And as I looked at them, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had brought Mary back, in a way, but at what cost? The police had found me in my home, surrounded by the organs I had collected. They had arrested me, charged me with multiple counts of murder. I was sentenced to death by lethal injection. The prison cell was cold, the walls closing in on me. I could hear the distant sounds of the prison, the clanging of bars, the muffled voices of guards. But all I could think about was Mary, her laughter, her love, her life. All gone, all lost. And all I had left were her organs, her pieces, her parts. I could still remember the smell of her perfume, the sound of her voice, the touch of her skin. I could still remember the way she looked at me, the way she loved me. And so, as I lay on the execution table, the lethal injection ready to end my life, and I thought about the lives I had taken, the lives I had destroyed, but I felt no remorse. I had done it for love, for Mary. Nestled in the heart of the Canadian wilderness, there was a remote sanctuary, isolated amidst the stoic mountain range and the unforgiving boreal forest. The desolate hotel, appropriately named the Frostbite, rose like a monolith against the harsh environment, a solitary beacon of human presence in the vast, unending expanse. It was this secluded hotel that I had selected for my retreat as I sought refuge from the clamorous world that throbbed outside my window. I am a middle-aged novelist, and the crippling noise and pace of urban life had worn me thin. A writer, I believe, thrives on silence and solitude, and the Frostbite, with its distant location and sparse clientele, seemed like the perfect haven. Each room was a cocoon, effectively soundproofed against the howling winds and the occasional murmurs of the neighboring guests. But there was one room adjacent to mine that held a sense of foreboding, room 303. It was the third day of my stay when I first noticed the man occupying room 303. He was a gaunt figure, an embodiment of profound grief, his eyes deep pools of desolation. He radiated an air of discomfort that sent ripples through my otherwise serene world, unsettling the calm surface of my solitude. In the days that followed, I noticed a chilling pattern. Late into the night, the man paced back and forth in his room, his footsteps echoing like a haunting symphony against the solid oak flooring. Sometimes, whispers of uncanny monologues escaped through the walls, punctuated by the unnerving sound of his laughter, disturbing the otherwise peaceful silence of the Frostbite. One evening, as I returned from a walk, a nauseating odor greeted me outside his door. It was a sickening amalgamation of metallic tang and decay, a scent that crawled into the nostrils and clung to the senses. The stench was so overwhelming that I found myself retching, my body rejecting the repugnant aroma with a visceral reaction. The very next day, I spotted him struggling to dispose of a large object, hastily concealed in a blood-stained sheet. His knuckles were white as they clung to the gruesome parcel, and a sheen of sweat covered his deathly pale face. Our eyes met, and a sudden chill seized me, an icy grip of terror that eclipsed all reason. That moment sparked an avalanche of dreadful thoughts. My mind was set ablaze with horrifying possibilities. The man's disturbing behavior, the repulsive smell, and the horrific parcel. The sinister puzzle pieces were falling into place, but I shrank from the picture they were forming. Resolute to confront him, I found myself standing before the door of room 303. My fist rose to knock but paused in midair. A wave of apprehension washed over me. I mustered my courage and rapped on the door. The sound echoed in the silence, unanswered. An eerie stillness hung in the air, sending shivers down my spine. My ear pressed against the cold door, straining for any sound, was met with an unsettling silence. Frantic, I sought the hotel manager. I relayed my concerns, my voice shaking as I recounted the peculiar behaviors of the man from room 303. The manager, a burly, pragmatic man, seemed skeptical but was swayed by my obvious distress. The door to room 303 creaked open under the careful hands of the manager, revealing a scene that was beyond any ghastly figment of my imagination. The room was a horrifying tableau, painted in varying shades of crimson. Centered in the room, splayed out grotesquely on the bed, lay the mutilated corpse of a wild boar. Its entrails were strewn around in a macabre display, the sight of which turned my stomach. The manager, ashen-faced, dialed the local authorities, his fingers trembling. I found myself leaning heavily against the wall, trying to reconcile the chilling scene with reality. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the silent accusation of the grotesque sight burned into my retinas. When the authorities arrived, their subsequent investigation unearthed a story that was more horrifying than the grisly scene itself. The man from room 303 was a renowned wildlife biologist suffering from severe psychosis. In his deranged state, he had hunted and killed the boar, deluded into believing that he was conducting groundbreaking scientific research. His insanity was revealed when he was found the next day, wandering aimlessly through the forest, repeating saving humanity in a crazy mantra. The hotel, the forest, the tranquility, everything was tainted with the residue of this terrifying episode.